Greetings, folks. I'm Baba Salim, known as Dr. Salim, and I'm here today to speak to one of my community daughters who goes by the name of Nzinga, and also her European name is Lashonia Thompson-El. And I've met her while I was doing a lot of training here in the District of Columbia, teaching balance and restorative practices. And so this is a podcast that was created, and we call it Come Back to Give Back, a restorative justice approach for redemption. And it's really based around returning citizens who have come back from the prison system and have a willingness to give back to their communities. My wife and I were just fortunate to have contracts with the city so that we could teach this balance and restorative tool to community-based organizations, primarily two agencies that receive funding to give returning citizens employment opportunities, and they wanted them to be trained in restorative justice. So they approached our organization, our company, with Youth and Families in Crisis, LLC. And under the My Art Training Institute, we have begun to teach and train a number of returning citizens here who have done extensive prison time in the federal system. And so they have gotten this skill, and they are giving it now back to the communities that they have caused a lot of havoc and destruction. And it's a real beautiful thing that has happened, because they now are not only making their communities better, but they're feeling better about themselves. And so I have Lashonia Thompson-El here today to just talk about some of the things that she's doing with her jobs and her way of life, using the principles and practices of restorative justice in the community. So, Lashonia, I'd like to welcome you here to our podcast. Many years ago, I had a radio show on WPFW. We called it Living for the City. And I would have guests come on who were making a positive contribution to the city. I was going to call this the Living for the City reboot, but then it's such a national topic, I didn't want to focus just on D.C., but I just wanted to bring this style of interviewing and hosting to this setting so that I could get people to come in and just talk about what they're doing with restorative justice. So I want to welcome you to our studio and to let the people know who you are and why did I choose you to come in here. Tell us a little bit about your upbringing here in D.C. and what led you into the prison system.
Awesome. Thank you so much for having me. Again, my name is Lashonia Thompson-El. I grew up in Ward 8, Southeast D.C. My most formative years was spent in Northeast D.C. I went to Charles Young Elementary School. And that is significant for me because that institution laid the foundation for me around like who I am and my history. We study Black history 365 days a year.
Wow.
All of my teachers were African American teachers, and I really believe I had a solid foundation. And then my mom moved from Northeast to Southeast, Ward 8, and I attended Hart Junior High School. And both my parents are from down south, so I'm a first-generation Washingtonian. And I don't think they really understood the environment that they was moving into. But when I was going to Hart Junior High, I was going to school with young people from the Valley Green Projects, Condon Terrace, Congress Park. We all went to the same school because Hart Junior High is just smack dab in the middle of everything. And then also the crack epidemic hit the city. And so quickly I went from just enjoying school and loving Black history to being trapped in a cycle of violence. I started to sell drugs. I started to carry weapons, and my life spiraled out of control. When I was 19, I landed myself in prison where I stayed for 18 years. And when I became incarcerated, I had 2 kids. So I was a teen mom, was uneducated because I dropped out of school. I was unemployed, and I was basically depressed. And I experienced a lot of trauma. Most of my trauma came about as a result of community violence. And so when I landed myself in prison, I stayed in prison for 18 years. I was released in 2011. When I got released, I started my social justice journey. I started out at the Mayor's Office on Return to Citizen Affairs, where I worked in female reentry work. And then I started a nonprofit organization called The Wire, Women Involved in Reentry Efforts. I went on to do some work around prison conditions at the Corrections Information Council. And then I landed myself at the D.C. Office of the Attorney General, which is basically the juvenile prosecutor's office here in D.C. So I was facilitating restorative justice conferences with young people who harmed other people in the community and the person that they harmed. So it would be the young person that caused the harm, the person that was harmed, and their supporters. And I would facilitate a dialogue to try to come up with an alternative agreement that didn't involve punishment. Then I went on to help start the Cure the Streets program, which is basically a replica of Cure Violence Global, which is an international gun violence intervention program. After that, I went on to the DC Peace Academy, where I helped to launch an institution that is currently training violence interrupters and credible messengers all over the city. And now I work for the Roca Impact Institute, where I teach cognitive behavior theory skills to people who are working with high-risk young people all across the nation. We train probation officers, violence interrupters, and school staff in different states throughout the U.S.
Wow, that's powerful. You mentioned that you had dropped out of school, but these employment opportunities that you have gotten, and the way that you articulate, and the way that you have advanced yourself in life, you apparently went back to school. So what was that all about? What school? What did you do? Did you get any degrees or anything? Talk about that.
Yes, great question. So I got my GED at CTF right here in D.C. I spent 5 years at CTF. And
What is CTF?
correction, yeah, so CTF is the Correctional Treatment Facility. When Lawton was shut down, they created the Correctional Treatment Facility, and basically that was the place where we were expected to serve our time. So I got sentenced to 20 to 60 years. I ended up staying there for about 5 years, and then they decided to contract with the federal system again, and we went back to the feds. I went back to the feds in 98. So I say back to the feds because, you know, our people was in the federal system before.
Right.
Then they came back because Lawton was built, and then we went back after Lawton was shut down.
Right.
It's kind of complicated. But so in 1998, I went into the federal system, and while I was there, I was able to participate in several college programs. I got a couple of certificates, and I also got a lot of transferable credits. So when I came home in 2011, Trinity Washington University accepted like 90 of my 100 credits that I accumulated when I was incarcerated, and I was able to complete my bachelor's degree in about 2 years, going to school part-time. So I was going to school while I was going through the reentry process. So it took a little while, but I ended up getting my bachelor's in human relations.
Wow, that's wonderful. I tell you that I have learned so much from all of you who have returned back into the community that we had opportunities to train in restorative justice. And you have a story in itself. And we had talked about earlier about how you have been on somewhat of a spiritual journey, like myself, in terms of my reason for writing a book, because I wanted the world to know that you can come from trauma as long as you acknowledge that you have a purpose in life, you stay on course. And it's quite apparent that that's how you have approached your life because of the stages of advancement and employment opportunities that have been presented to you have made you a certain kind of a person. You're making a contribution back into your community. You fall right into the concept of why we have this come back to give back to seek redemption, because that's what you're doing now. Speaking of that, what are you doing with your restorative justice training and the things that you have acquired nowadays as time continues to move forward?
Yes, and just listening to you talking about purpose, it reminded me of one of my favorite quotes that helps me get through a lot of tough times. I read this book called Man's Search for Meaning by Viktor Frankl, and he has a quote in there where he says, he who has a why to live can bear almost any how. So being incarcerated was traumatic on top of the trauma that I had already experienced. And also reentry was traumatic.
Sure.
Because I had to relearn my city, relearn my family, just develop life skills that I didn't have at the age of 38. It was very awkward. And now I'm in a position where I can give back to the girls who live in the same community where I grew up. That is very profound, because there are lots of people that do not want to go in Ward 8. They don't want to go into the community. They don't want to go into the homes or the schools. But because I grew up in that environment, unfortunately, it's normal to me. And so I'm able to go back into the community and share my lived experience, but also empathize and understand the predicament that the young people are in now. I understand that people are not their behaviors. I understand that a lot of times when we look at young people and they're doing things and we're like, what's wrong with them? How could they do such a thing? The question we should be asking is what happened to them? Because as I said earlier, basically it's the trauma to prison pipeline. Young people are being exposed to violence. They're being victims of violence. And as a result of that, they are engaging in violence because they don't have any other way to process or express the trauma that they're experiencing. So I feel like my goal in life is to help young people to build resilience to trauma, be able to heal from it when possible, and also develop new ways of being, develop new ways of responding to those triggers and those situations in the community where they live. Because trauma not going away overnight. It's not healing overnight. But we need to have those skills to be able to navigate in that space without causing further harm to others or to ourselves. So I constantly hold circles with girls in Ward 8. It's my absolute favorite thing to do. And one of the things that I find to be profound is that they always want it. I have worked with girls who, as I said, they've been exposed to violence. If you was to look at them, you would think they were some of the most angriest kids with the worst attitudes, and they do the best in circle. They are the ones who engage the most and enjoy it the most, because young people just want a safe space where they feel like they can be heard, to express themselves and process the experiences that they have in the community, because we holding that trauma in our body. Like hurt people, heal people. And when we have circles, we create an opportunity for people to be able to process that trauma and to evolve.
You speaking of circles, you're saying now that you're doing work in the community, you now have a tool
Yes.
to bring back some
That's it.
form of quality of life to the community. And apparently, circles must be one of the practices of restorative justice, because you continue to mention that. Because I know in my training, I've been certified over and over by many institutions. Circle became my specialty because I realized how effective it can be in impoverished communities. What is a circle, Lashonia? Explain
Yes.
that to your viewers.
So circle is basically where you come together. You're sitting in circle, and you also have a centerpiece, something to help keep you centered, something that you can focus on. And it usually has symbolic items that help inspire and invoke like feelings of joy and peace. It may involve mindfulness. It involves like having certain guidelines and values to conduct throughout the circle. It involves a talking piece. And when you have the talking piece, you have permission and power to speak and be heard. And the others in the circle have permission and power to basically hold space for you and hear you. And if we pass the circle, because this is an indigenous practice, I want to make sure I say this. This is a practice that has been around for generations, hundreds of years. Native American people use it, African people use it, and we're keeping it alive in our community, in African American community in DC by using, restorative practices, but also for me, mostly circle. So if I pass the talking piece to the right when I'm in circle, I'm honoring that African tradition. And if I pass it to the left, I'm honoring the Native American tradition. But the idea is that everybody in the circle has an opportunity to speak and be heard. Of course, if you want to pass, you can pass, but nobody is skipped over. Everybody is included in the conversation. So circles are inclusive. There's no big I's, no little U's. Everybody is equal when you're in circle, and it's an opportunity for you to express and also to hold space for others as they express whatever it is that we're going through.
Now, I know in my work, we have used circles for prevention, and then we've used it for reactive, responsive, like proactive. How do you use those for those two different settings?
Yes. So, like I said, when I was at the D.C. Office of the Attorney General, I was working with young people who cause harm in the community, and that was reactive or responsive. So the young person would get an opportunity to explain to the person that they harmed what I was thinking, what made me do this, and also what happened to me. And the person that was harmed could get an opportunity to express to the young person how they was impacted by their harm. The young person can express to that person that they harmed, apologies. The person that was harmed gets an opportunity to see the young person beyond just the incident that happened, but see them as a person to potentially move toward healing. When we use it in a more proactive or preventive space, it's about building community, teaching young people, and my specialty is girls, teaching girls, especially in Ward 8, how to navigate conflict, how to be able to operate in a society that is not always fair.
Right.
How to manage what you're feeling, how to flex your thinking and challenge your thoughts so that you don't necessarily have to react to situations and triggers in a way that causes harm to yourself or others. I'm also being called now to hold circle with various executives throughout the city who want to be able to strengthen their relationship with one
Right,
another so that they
absolutely.
can be better advocates and better servants of the community. I got a call just yesterday from a mom who served a year in prison, who has a daughter who's about 5 or 6, and she wants to have a circle with her daughter to process what that experience was like for them and how to move forward as a unit. So it's so many different ways that you can use circle, and I basically do it all. Anytime somebody call me with a problem, my first question is, would you like to have circle? Because that is the only thing that I know that actually helps.
And it sounds like to me, and I have looked at this many times in the past, you become like a para restorative justice practitioner. You know how they have paramedics where they're called to an emergency or what have you?
Putting out fires.
Putting out fires. And I know that, this circle practice can be used for that particular purpose too. We happen to have an opportunity last couple of weeks now to work with a family here at Horton's Kids, and there's a lot of issues going on. And we find that it was very effective with just one setting with the family, because we believe in the work. You got to believe in the work.
Amen.
And, we have talked about how if you use this work, you become a restorative person. Now, I have also wondered now, Lashonia, in the city, all the people, hundreds of people that we've trained who've come home from prison and got this tool, how many are using it effectively? Because we did our research and we did our studies, and we strongly felt in our heart if this was used properly, we could reduce tremendously the violence that's taking place in the city. And then we were beginning to question ourselves on whether it is being practiced appropriately.
Fidelity.
Use the fidelity that we have trained people on, because people try to water it down and try to make it something that is not. And we know that if it's used the way that it's supposed to be used, because a lot of research went into this. I got my training at Florida Atlantic University, which was a grant that came out of the State Department. You all may remember, you're young, Janet Reno was, she worked for Bill Clinton, did she? She worked for one of the presidents, but she's the one that came up when she was Department of State Department, this restorative justice thing. And this was way back in the 60s. And then later on in the 90s is when it got into my life. And I must say it has made me a restorative thinking person, every aspect of my life. And we firmly know that if you really get involved in this, if you practice the fidelity of this work, you will become a restorative justice person by nature. What do you have to say about that? Would you consider yourself a restorative person?
Yes, I do. And I believe it is a lifestyle, a way of life, a way of being. And as you was talking, it's like a couple things came up for me. What does it mean to be restorative? Believing in the capacity of everybody to change and transform and be better. Believing that everybody has the potential within themselves to develop the best that is within them. Believing that, like, in community, we can support each other and deal with our own issues, and that we don't have to call somebody in to fix our problems.
Right. That's one of the issues that I've had with people calling 911 to come into a community and the police come in and kill some of our people. That's something that restorative justice, if it's practiced properly, we would not have to call 911 as much as we have, which always brings about more harm. There are so many things that we can talk about. If this practice is utilized in the way that it should, it can impact reducing the violence that's taking place, not only in D.C., but across the board. What do you have to say about the future of restorative justice here in D.C., particularly in D.C.?
Yes, I appreciate that question, because in D.C. we have the capacity to do what you just described, to handle our own situations and conflicts. We need to know who to call instead of calling 911, because not everything is appropriate for 911. The police's job is to solve crime. We want to prevent crime. We want to be able to help heal harm. That's not the police's job. So I have this debate with people all the time about, like, shouldn't civilians be able to call the police? And my answer is no. The police are not here to protect or heal or solve problems for black people. So we need to develop our capacity, our skills, and our confidence to be able to hold circles, whether it's in my neighborhood, in my family, in my house, in my community, in my work, in my school, whatever the case may be. You can hold circle. You can address these issues. And it's a lot that you talk about in circle, because you have community building and competency building and mindfulness and all those great things. But the meat of the discussion, I just want to share these 3 questions, because I think we try to complicate things sometimes, and maybe that's why people think like it's over my head or it's beyond me and something I can't do. But if somebody has been harmed, the 3 questions are pretty straightforward. What happened? How have you been impacted? And what do we need to do to make this right? Then we come up with an agreement that is monitored so that these individuals can hold themselves accountable to doing whatever it is that they say they want to do.
Wow, you really got it. And you know, this is something that we know, if we would utilize this tool for what it is, how we can make a major difference in our communities. Now, I have seen situations where 911 was not called for. Now, one of the highlights about this circle, this restorative practice, Lashonia, is that as black people, as African Americans, we don't believe in therapy. We have all kinds of issues. We hold on to our trauma, and if you hold on it deep enough, it not only affects the mind negatively, it affects the body. I'm not saying that circles is therapy, but it can be therapeutic, because if nothing else, it allows you to release to people who care about you. And you really only invite people to the circle that really care about one another. You don't just bring somebody in your circle that's going to cause an argument and all that. And if you facilitate the circle properly, it can move forward and you can get positive results once it's all said and done, right?
Yes, and it is a volunteer
It's
process.
volunteer.
And people are there, want to be there.
Yes.
They want to resolve and they want to move towards peace. And it's a facilitated dialogue. Yesterday I was in circle with 5 girls. And when we started to talk about trauma, I'm going to be honest, I was astonished at what they shared. One young lady shared that she witnessed her brother being murdered. I think this little girl ain't no more like 13 years old. Another young lady shared that she experienced molestation. Young people need space to let this stuff out so that they're not holding on to it, and it's impacting their attitude, it's impacting their behavior. And again, we're looking at them and asking what's wrong with them instead of asking what happened to them.
That's why this tool or this practice is so crucial in our communities, because we're not going to try to get therapy. In most cases, we don't even know we need therapy. And this is something that can allow one to come, talk about it, release something so that they can get some solutions. Because whenever we leave a circle, we always leave in a positive way, and we always come up with some kind of solution or recommendation to make things better,
Yes.
to make matters right. And that's why I said that if this is utilized in our community the way that it is supposed to be utilized, as we say, using it according to the fidelity of this practice, we wouldn't have all of this violence. And when I first got trained in this work and came here in the city, because I brought it to D.C., you know, I was trained and I did national training all around the country. And then when I was with YSA, which is now Youth Rehabilitation Services, I brought it here and we brought it and gave it to all the communities. And when I left there, I started going in the communities. Ivy and I doing circles with or without pay, because we saw that it was effective, right? So what can we do from this point on, Lashonia, to make right matters better using this restorative justice practice in the community here in D.C. to make better? What do we want to do? I know we had talked about earlier how we need to bring all of us who've been trained in this together so we can come up with a master plan to really attack this thing, this matter, this problem here. Because most of these kids that are causing havoc in the community, most of them have been traumatized early on in life. And like you said earlier, hurt people hurt people. They don't have any conscience about shooting someone, taking somebody's life. We even was starting a underground circle concept where the shooters would come and talk about their issues, and they would all say they wanted to get out of the life, but they didn't know how to. So, you know, you get addicted to the lifestyle like any other addiction. So how can we use this tool as we wrap this interview up? How can we use this restorative justice practice to meet the objectives that we set out to do with this tool? What is your suggestion as we move forward?
We have to use, our goal is to build a community of practice. So we need to create space for those folks who have already been trained. We have the lived experience. We understand what the young people are experiencing as far as the trauma and how it impacts their mental health and impacts their behavior. And now it's about creating the system that makes it more fluid. So I should know who to call, and they need to be able to assemble the circle as quickly as possible. The circle process got to be swift, just like we want punishment to be swift. Something happened, you can't wait 6 months to try to address it if you can help it. You want to try to address it as quickly as possible, which means we need a pool of trained restorative justice facilitators that believe in this work that we can call on, and they need to have the space, the safe space, and the tools that they need to be able to do it effectively. Like, you got to understand, you got to prep, you got to do your pre-conferencing, you got to have your script, you need to make sure you have all the supplies you need. Mama Ivy trained us once. She gave everybody a restorative justice bag. All your stuff should be in your bag, and your bag should be in your trunk.
That's right.
Because you never know when you're going to have
That's
circle.
right.
And you talked about therapy. The reason why restorative justice works is because it's about relationships and trust.
Mm-hmm.
Some young people have therapists, but they don't want to talk to them.
I know.
They don't trust them.
I know.
They don't believe that it's going to be a judgment-free space.
Right.
And I can't make them trust the therapist.
Right.
I don't know the therapist. The therapist is a human being. So that is a reasonable concern. Is this person going to judge me? Why would I want to tell them my innermost thoughts?
Right.
So, but with restorative justice, how the saying goes that progress moves at the speed of trust. When you're in a circle, you're doing the trust building, the community building, creating safe, brave space. And you may be surprised at how people actually gravitate towards that process and really use it as an opportunity to express whatever is ailing them and process it and move forward. And then earlier you asked me, previously you asked me a question about how my lived experience has prepared me for this moment. I think just like other returning citizens, because I have had these experiences of being a victim of violence, even perpetrating violence, and then learning and developing all the skills that I have, this has put me in a position where I can go in and I can help young people to build the capacity to change as well. Because they know that I can relate. They know that I'm from their community. They know that I understand their circumstances and I'm not coming in to judge or tell them what to do. I'm just coming in to hold space to help foster that healing for them.
And that's the beauty of this practice coming into our community, because I had spoke earlier about how there's been that conspiracy about this mass incarceration and how they locked up all of our men, primarily our men, and then now they're our women, and how they thought that that was going to cause destruction in our community, which it did for a period of time, and how it was going to hold us back. But because of the brilliance and the African spirit that we have the most resilient spirit on the planet. And because of that, we have been able to come back into the community and look for redemption. And I know before you come, like you said, when you were coming back, you was making that transition, you probably said, well, what am I going to do? How can I? And then you run into this restorative justice work, and you can see, wow, I can use this tool to give back, to uplift my community. This is wonderful. So what I'm saying now, Lashonia, is that there's a lot of purpose behind you all being locked up and coming back. And now you have a lifetime tool that you can use to improve the quality of life of the people, community that you have come from. So that's the beauty of it all. And I just want to close on that because I know myself, and I've seen many of the transitions in the community where people are needing some answers. And we know that we can solve these problems ourselves. When I was in Senegal, I believe, there was a traffic accident, and the two people who hit one another's car, what have you, they got out and they started talking and what have you, and then all of a sudden it's like these elders came from the heavens and they surrounded the people who were the one who hit the other and whatever. And in a matter of about 30 minutes, it was resolved. And how they resolved it, it was just wonderful. When I was in Ghana, I was, being involved in criminal and juvenile justice, I get up early and I was walking around in the village and I ran into this young man and I said, hey, where's y'all's prison or your jail? He said, well, there's so many whatever far away. I said, oh, yeah. I said, well, about how many people that's in your prison? Do you know? He said 3. Mm-hmm. I said, what? He said, yes. I said, why is that? He said, you would rather be held accountable by the jail if you committed a crime than your family or your village, because the village will hold you accountable for anything that you went out of the realm of their values. See, that's how deep it is.
Yes,
and
I've seen that.
And we have a village, but we don't have any true values that we can hold on to keep us in line. And that's why we get so out of line. Now, if we were to bring our spiritual principles and the values that we've learned in this restorative justice work, because restorative justice is a spiritual movement, us practitioners have to realize that, embrace that, and act accordingly. If we did so, matters would be better across the board. So I just say that if we are a village, we have to conduct ourselves like a village. When I was in, we went down to the Gullah Geechee community, and as I close on this, we witnessed their way of life. And when a crime was committed in their community, they had what they call a praise house, and the elders would come to the praise house. And if you committed a you committed a crime, you'd have to go before the elders, and you would be held accountable. And the elders would tell you how they were going to sanction whatever it was that you did that dishonored the village. That's what's happening. When you dishonor the principles and the values of the village, you have to be held accountable. We have lost that. The Gullah Geechee community are still practicing the way of life from Africa. They're still the most traditional African practice community in America, in the United States of America. We don't have that. If we operate as a village, we can stop calling 911 to deal with our problems, okay? So we have to do whatever we can. We were talking about perhaps you mentioned bringing people together who've gotten this work and what have you. And so let's move forward. Let's see how we can bring people together to do something to make a difference on this. This is Baba Salim. I'm talking to Lashonia and Thompson-El, and we've been talking about how many of the returning citizens have come back into the District of Columbia and have used restorative justice practices and principles to uplift the communities in which they have caused harm. And we have come up with some ideas and some thoughts about how we can move forward to do that. And Lashonia, I'm going to challenge you now. Even though I have relocated to a more peaceful environment, but it just gives me more energy and more insight on how I can make a bigger difference. So can we work together to see how we can at least bring all of those that we have trained in the city to do this thing right, so that we can reduce some of this violence in the city?
Yes, I'm up for the challenge.
You're up for the challenge. I thank you. Well, this has been a wonderful conversation I've had with Lashonia, and I want to ask you, is there any closing remarks that you would like to make as we close out our interview?
Yes, in closing, I just want to give a very special honor to you, Baba Salim, and Mama Ivy, for everything that you have done for the reentry community and the credible messengers, and just the willingness to embrace us and accept us and forgive us and train us in these restorative practices, so that we could use them in our lives, in our families, and in our communities to make a difference.
Well, thank you so much. I received that, and we feel blessed that we had the opportunity to meet all of you all, and we're just not working together as we should, as I feel the universe has sanctioned us to work together. So all we have to do is continue to follow the spirit. Let's do what we're supposed to do so that we can make a greater difference here in the District of Columbia. Amen.
Awesome. Amen.
All right. Well, I want to thank you all for your time and checking us out today. And I want to thank Horton's Kids for allowing us to use their space. It's a wonderful space. They're doing such marvelous work in the community. And it's because of them that we're able to come in here and conduct these interviews, which we feel that will go into a documentary so many people can see exactly what's going on in D.C. and how we will continue to work toward reducing the violent behaviors amongst the youth. Thank you again. Peace and love.
Peace.